When you are looking to communicate with the spirit of a loved one, are you testing it? If so, you actually might be blocking the connection that you seek. You can tell who you're speaking to by how they move, but not always by the words they give you. If that voice you're hearing forces you, demands obedience, or leaves you with a heavy consequence for saying no, that's time to take a step back because that's not guidance, that's control. And today, I want to show you how you can test without trapping yourself, how to validate spirit information without turning your gifts into a courtroom, and why the very act of testing can actually become the block you're trying to overcome. Now, I understand people are worried about what about low level entities? What about a being that comes in pretending to be my father? Those are very important things to be paying attention to. And it's really important to understand that we don't want to connect with lower level entities because they can give us bad choices. They can really confuse us spiritually. They can really kind of mess with things that we don't want to. This is why I always tell people you got to test and validate, but be very careful here because validation definitely is about discerning the origin and the coherence of the message. And testing is proving that that information is valid, but sometimes that testing comes into the realm of demanding linear proof. And why this is important to understand that discernment is because lower level entities, they can be really pushy. They demand compliance with what they're telling you. They attach consequences if you don't do what they're telling to you, and they'll create fear to force you into action. Now that's because they live in like a limited time sense. They're doing it for their benefit, whereas higher level beings are in it for your best benefit. They can be very persistent, almost annoyingly, but they're not coercive. They'll give you space for free will so that their guidance can be integrated and proven over time. They'll never give you a demand, do it now, it has to be now. If you don't do it, this is going to happen to you. And it's really important to be aware of that message and how that message comes across. And I know we want to really connect with spirits. We really want to get that information through. And that's the first testing I want to give to you. Are they pushy? Are they demanding? Is there a fear? Is there a consequence? Step back. Say no. If it seems like they're giving you some bogus information, but you're not sure, well, test it. Try it out. It could be a higher level being trying to get you to step out of your comfort zones, trying to get you to learn something new that maybe doesn't make sense right now, but it will when you put it into motion. So test it. And again, if it feels a consequence, step away. If not, give it a shot. Now, one of the most important things to keep in mind is your own mind is a critical component to this. Every spiritual connection is co created. And we are spiritual beings and we are physical beings. We are both. So we can't ignore the brain. The brain's an important part of this. Our neocortex, our prefrontal cortex, it craves linear causal information. It wants names, dates, facts. And this part of our mind is so used to running the bus that we have to give an explanation. We have to give an answer for the things we know. We have to tell people why we know something, or sometimes we even say to ourselves, I need to know why. It's got to be very rational, very logical. But then there's intuitive information, which usually gets lost because the neocortex wants to be in control. Intuitive information tends to be nonlinear, very abstract, associative. It doesn't have a logical context with it, which can be very, very confusing to the brain that wants it. You'll get this subjective feeling when you're working with intuitive information. It feels like I'm just making this up. Am I just talking to myself? And it's very difficult to prove to somebody why you know something, how you know something. And sometimes you get ridiculed because I just know it. I just have a gut feeling about it. A lot of people don't want to say my natural abilities, my paranormal senses, my psychic gifts said this to me because you're going to get laughed at. So, of course, we're going to push it away. But that is why we have this need sometimes. I've got to test, I've got to have this answer because our logical linear mind is craving that proof. I get it. And that's okay. But this testing can become a block. because there's like this expectation that you have to get information in a certain way. It has to make sense in a certain context. And that could lead to doubt like, oh, I don't know. Am I just making this up? Am I not really making a connection? I expected my mother to come through and say the specific word, but no one's ever gotten that word. So this must not be real. So that doubt comes in. And so when you are expecting a specific code word or a specific phrase or to be getting specific information in a specific way, you're actually closing that channel. You're starting to doubt the medium. You're doubting the message. You're doubting yourself. You're doubting the whole process. And that shuts down. But when we look to some research, and there's actually been research done with this in clinical settings, I'll do another video on this at another time. But this research shows that when mediums are expected to deliver objective proof, like names, code words, they fail. But they succeed when they're sharing subjective, evidential details like feelings, images, mannerisms, things that you can recognize that a loved one gives across. You may know your father's name, but the medium might not. But the medium will pick up on, oh, yeah, he seemed to be pretty stern and emotionless, but you could always see some of that sadness behind his eyes. That comes through in the clinical testing. And the laboratory studies confirm that spiritual communication works best through symbolic, nonlinear information. And that when you start demanding exact facts, that lowered the accuracy of the results because it was creating blocks in the process. So there's a paradox here. The more that you're demanding this linear, objective, concrete proof, the less you're actually going to receive nonlinear truth, the less that you're going to actually have a connection. And an interesting example of this is I was working with a client who was reconnecting with her mother, but every psychic she saw, every medium she saw, even herself, said she expected her mother to call her a special pet name. This is a pet name that her mother called her entire life. And so she was testing everybody, saying, she has to come through. She has to call me this name. If I don't get that, then it's not her. I'm not hearing that at all. So she got frustrated. But that expectation shut down everything. It shut down her connection. It shut down the subtle imagery, the feelings, the actuality that her mother was there. And so, why did this pet name test fail? It's because names are linear. The spirit's truth came through their demeanor, through images, even a scent, small gestures, patterns of memories, not in words, not in linear forms of communication. And that works for me too. When I started to do public seances and I wanted to get more into the public, I asked the whisperers, my guides, will you help me get people's names? Because people want that names. And they're like, no, we're not going to let you have names. And I'm like, come on. People want names. People expect names. They're like, I know, but that's not accurate. That's not good. And I'm like, it was almost knocked down, drag out until they finally said, look, you're terrible at people's names in the day to day world. You can't remember them. You get them wrong. You stumble over names. Why would we introduce that extra confusion into a communication setting, especially when the communication is abstract, nonlinear, and lacks context? And I got it. And I'm like, okay, I get what you're saying. I can follow that. Instead, they said to read the essence of the spirit coming through, their demeanor, the way they hold themselves, the emotions. You'll get images, you'll get signature ideas about who this person is. You'll pick up their energetic signature and people will recognize that. And since I've started doing that, things have gotten so much better. Now, I know we want to hear those words. I know we want to hear those names, but maybe there's a way we can move on without having them. So I want to give you some ways of doing some validation without the linear testing. And here's some methods that really can help you verify a spirit's origin and message without demanding like a code word or a special phrase. So cross checks over time. Look for some of the same reoccurring images, the feelings across sessions. You see, a spirit's name is not a verbal thing. It's kind of a feeling. And you'll know that same feeling Like when you're around a friend or a loved one, you know what it feels like to be around them. Well, that's their spiritual name. And when you're working with a spirit over time, you'll get those same names. You'll get those same impressions of what they look like, how they dress, how they carry themselves. You'll see that repeated over and over. And that is a great way of validating information. Another great way is external corroboration, right? They're going to give you some guidance. They're going to tell you to look up stuff, to read some stuff, to talk to certain people. Well, those are testable results in the world. You can go out and find out, oh, yes, this is something. Oh, when I start studying that, it starts clicking. It makes sense. And it's just not forcing. You're not forcing a word out. You're just kind of connecting with the information and seeing if that information holds true for you. And you can always get indirect confirmations. For example, a lady wanted to connect with her dad, and I got some imagery that he was on a boat. And she's like, yep, he loved being on boats. He was on boats all the time. You see, we didn't need a name. We just got that information that he loved being on boats. And of course, think about the emotions. You know, when grandma shows up and you had a great relationship with grandma, things were wonderful. You'll remember that warmth. You'll remember that kindness. A lady came into me as a client wanting to connect with her father, and she was sad, but her father kept cracking jokes the entire time he was there. And she said, yeah, that's just the way he was in real life. That was validating information. You can always ask for progressive proof. You know, keep revisiting the same spirits, the same guides over and over, and let the information and the message reveal itself in stages, stages that you can go out and validate. So have some patience with the process, really look into it, and let the information prove itself. These little micro practices, they really prevent those blocks, especially if you can take just a centering breath before asking, quieting any sort of expectations, and just asking for information that you can verify instead of tell me a name, tell me a code word. Now, I know there's going to be some questions here. There's going to be some objections like, well, what if a spirit lies? Trust your emotions. The primary form of spirit communication is emotional. So tap into what are you feeling from this person? Does it feel a little shady? Does it feel a little weird? You know what I'm talking about. When you're talking to people in the daily world and day to day world, some people just seem a little off, or some people you feel comfortable, like you can trust them. It's the same way with spirits, but also look at consistency and consequence, because lies, they will often contradict themselves. They'll contradict themselves over time, especially when you start trying to see, is this real? Is this real? Wait, you told me this last time, but now you're telling me this. Look for that. Look if you're feeling fear. If you're feeling something fearful, something doesn't feel right, call in a guide, call in a high level ally, seal your energy and just even say, go away. I'm not talking to you. And what about the feeling that if you're making it up? Well, use cooperation. Find out if that information is real. Look for repeated motives and go find if that information holds up in the daily world. You know, keep testing everything. Test the results, not necessarily the spirit. So, the main takeaway that I have for this is validate through pattern, through effect, through consistent essence. And don't trap the process with expectations. Don't expect to get somebody's name. Don't go out looking to a medium expecting, well, you got to tell me my dad's name. You've got to give me mom's pet name for me. You're going to block it. That expectation kills the channels. But patience and testing those patterns and working with it over time, you'll start to reveal the truth for yourself. Now, what you've just seen is that when you demand that spirits give you a name, a code word, or an exact fact, you are shutting the very door that you're trying to open. Testing like that will create doubt, and that doubt creates blocks, and those blocks will cut you off from the guidance that's trying to reach out to you. And the solution isn't to test harder, it's to learn how to receive more clearly. That means developing your ability to validate through essence, presence, and repeated patterns. It means learning to trust the nonlinear way of communication that higher beings use. This is a skill. And just like any skills, It grows best through training and guidance. And that's why I do offer one on one personal mentoring in the paranormal. This is to help sharpen your gifts, overcome those blocks, and step into this communication confidently. I do have a few spots still open, and if you're feeling that call to develop your abilities, book a consultation with me, and we'll see if this path is right for you. All you have to do is just look in the description down below, just click the link, head to my website, and schedule a free call. Let's stop testing the spirits like a lab experiment and start learning how to partner with a wisdom that helps you become more whole. Hail.